Good evening, everybody. You're very welcome to Molly for this evening's Rooney Prize interview. We're delighted to be hosting this interview once again in person, and this time with a nice big crowd as well. I think we were just talking earlier on that it was right before all of the restrictions were lifted last year when we had the previous interview. So it's lovely to have you all here, and hopefully joining us for a few glasses of wine in the saloon afterwards. Just to let you know, apologies to the people who are tuning in online. You'll just have to find something in the cupboard and imagine, but do join us afterwards as well. A small bit of housekeeping, if you wouldn't mind turning your mobile phones off, that would be most appreciated. We are recording the event, so it will eventually find its way onto the museum's archive if you want to listen back to it. I'd like to thank Peter Rooney and the Rooney Prize jury as well, not only for obviously for bringing this event to us every year, but for their remarkable hit rate with the prize. It's absolutely exceptional, and we're always really excited to see who's going to win every year. And we were particularly excited to see Seán Hewitt announced as the 2022 winner. As you know, Jared Manley Hopkins haunts Seán's wonderful memoir, All Down Darkness Wide, and we were very fortunate to have Seán do some reading in Hopkins' bedroom, which is actually on a floor above us in this building. He was the professor of classics here in the Catholic University for the last 5 years of his life, and he died very close to the lift, actually, on the first floor, if any of you wish to explore that. Things rattle in this building, and unexpectedly, and we often attribute it to Hopkins. So Seán isn't the only one who's haunted by him. I'd also like to thank in advance the wonderful Carlo Gébler, who's going to be conducting the interview this evening, and of course last year's winner, Niamh Campbell, who I'll be handing over to now. We're in the absolute best company, and thank you all for joining. So, Niamh.
Thank you, Simon. I'm going to start by introducing you all formally to Seán, and then saying a little bit about the work before the interview begins. Seán Hewitt was born in 1990. His debut collection of poetry, Tongues of Fire, is published by Jonathan Cape. He's a book critic for the Irish Times, and he teaches modern British and Irish literature at Trinity College, Dublin. Tongues of Fire won the Laurel Prize in 2021. It was shortlisted for the Sunday Times Young Writer of the Year Award, the John Pollard Foundation International Poetry Prize, and a Dalkey Literary Award in 2020. He was chosen by the Sunday Times as one of their 30 under 30 artists in Ireland also in 2020. He's the winner of a Northern Writers Award, the Resurgence Prize, and an Eric Gregory Award. And his book, J.M. Singh, Nature, Politics, Modernism, is published with Oxford University Press. Seán's memoir, All Down Darkness Wide, is published by Jonathan Cape in the UK and Penguin in the US. It was shortlisted for Biography of the Year at the An Post Irish Book Awards and for the Foyles Book of the Year in Non-Fiction. And of course, Hewitt was awarded the Rooney Prize for Irish Literature in 2022. I am heavily pregnant and slightly breathless, I just realised. So I'm going to go through this slowly. But it's a real pleasure to be here with, as Simon says, a bigger crowd than what we could have last year to hand over, as it were, the Rooney and watch the interview. So it actually so happens that I received an advance copy of All Down Darkness Wide sometime before it came out, and I can remember beginning to read it, starting with a quote from the writer Colm Tóibín, which is still on the hardback cover. Tóibín writes, "I was engrossed by the book, hardly looking up as I read. I woke in the morning fully enclosed by it as though I had been dreaming it." The curious effect that this quote had on me at the time was like a gong going off, symbolising in an almost drugged way the boundary between one state of mind, alert, await, expectant, to another, engrossed, enveloped, seduced, which is genuinely borne out by the experience of reading Seán's book. This is a work which creates and sustains its own emotional atmosphere and its own affective microclimate. And it does this through both the singularly commanding and distinct, modern but somehow timeless effect of the writer's voice, but also through its inspired commitment to an opulent, Gothic, almost high church sensibility that is nonetheless never gratuitous or theatrical. All Down Darkness Wide is a work which is, in terms of language, imagery, and psychological richness, quite luxurious. But its authenticity and plain-spoken sorrow also make it feel very lived in and real and close to the truth of life in a way that few books can be. And it balances or perhaps even transfuses painful self-exposure with a commitment to high style. And Seán is a writer who is good enough to carry this kind of risk off with great fluency. All Down Darkness Wide opens with a muted drama that is unabashed and intensely elegant in the oratory of St. James's Cemetery in Liverpool, a building we are told is windowless. This being the first trigger to that sense of slightly opiate claustrophobia developed throughout the book. This opening section summarizes cinematically the demolition of great houses, monuments, slums, orphanages, asylums, all the architecture of empire, and describes a palimpsestic Liverpool in which, the quote to quote, the names of the dead engraved in plaques on newly pointed walls are the climbing holes of a city once again dragging itself up out of its own grave. The cemetery is also a cruising ground, and the scene and setting lead us into a story about ghosts, about the hidden, the obscured, the secretive, the shameful, and the gorgeous, which is also a queer coming-of-age narrative, an involved analysis of queer experience in 90s and noughties Britain, a love story, a loss story, and a moving tribute to the poets Gerard Manley Hopkins and, less familiarly to an Anglophone audience, Coran Boy. Hopkins is the presiding spirit of All Down Darkness Wide, a figure for desperate longing and possible mystical deliverance, who himself transmuted much of his suffering into a poetry of obscurity or sfumato and code. Seán's own poetic voice, established in Tongues of Fire, has a lyric gravitas that is more suggestive to me of a poet like Ted Hughes. But in All Down Darkness Wide, Hopkins' intensity and air of tragedy is gently distilled into the eerie image from a single poem, The Lantern Out of Doors. And to read a little from the poem as it's quoted in the book. Men go by me, whom either beauty bright in mould or mind or what not else makes fair. They rain against our much thick and marsh air rich beams, till death or distance buys them quite. I should have said rare, not fair there. My handwriting is not great. The poem springs into use when the protagonist, Seán, begins or learns by accident of the death of Jack, a university love. And almost at once we are in this luminous light of localized memories, which are, like all the locations and spaces depicted in All Down Darkness Wide, evoked with such painterly or poetic precision, their illumination forms an almost Manichaean opposite to the darkness wide of the book. At Cambridge, when Seán and Jack meet, formal gardens are described as full of white hyacinths and the scent of viburnums lilted headily over the lawns. In Columbia, where the post-Cambridge Seán meets his next great love, Elias, one of the most central characters in the book, there is, quote, hot sun on terracotta roofs, all the white buildings gleaming in the squares, the dome of the basilica against the blue sky and the mountains. Here, in this moment, Seán draws the curtain so that the sun won't disturb the sleeping Elias, the first of many gestures of care, and a foreshadowing of the darkness that is then to come over this story. When they first spend the night together, the protagonist, Seán, feels as though I had pulled some figment of a dream back into real life with me, the night before it happened and he was there, lying next to me, like the proof of some unlikely and secret miracle. Then, after I went to shower, I came back and found he was gone. Seán, still a university student, moves to Sweden to be with Elias, whose crushing and suicidal depression turns him into an inversion of himself, both the man I loved and the person who wanted to kill the man I loved. In such quietly horrifying observations, the tools made available to biography by fiction and poetry are expertly evident. A Jekyll and Hyde inversion of the self, a glimpse of beautiful men processing doomed into a death which buys them quite, the stark forests of Scandinavia, and the sterile quiet of the asylum come to life as things both intimately experienced and alchemized through literary style. And this might itself be seen as a pure, controlled, but deceptively revealing expression of artistic personality, and by that I mean style. What I mean is that style requires more than craft or practice. It is sublimatory, a form of expression which requires patience, instinct, commitment, and care. Excuse me. I admire All Down Darkness Wide and also Tongues of Fire for many reasons, but that which I think makes Seán an especially worthy winner of the Rooney Prize is this artfully, authentically elegant originality. It is this, in this it transcends its putative topicality and gives to the pain and anger of being socially marginalised, the psychic suffering that follows from this, a deep sense of history and dignity, as well as flair. So I'll let the interview begin now and leave it at that. And can only congratulate Seán. Thank you.
I'm going to talk about All Down Darkness Wide mostly, or maybe exclusively. The first thing I wanted to ask you about is the structure. It's very, very, very beautifully engineered, and it's also, which we might come on to discuss, there's quite a lot of the chronology that you've lopped out. But what I was very struck by when I was reading was I get to page 7, which is very close to the beginning, and I read. And it's written in the very sort of, there's something very direct about the use of language. It was only 2 weeks since I'd taken my boyfriend Elias to the airport for the last time. There's a devastating line. I had lived with him in Sweden, and he had fallen into a depression, one that went unchecked for too long. You then go off to other things, but you have these 2 lines. So as a reader, you think to yourself, well, that's a kind of haiku, compressed version of everything. Mm-hmm. It's going to be about this relationship. It's presumably going to be about the fact that it didn't work out. And, okay, you've put the ace on the table. You're not holding it back. Why did you do that as a writer?
I suppose I think of the opening of a book. Hello, everyone. I suppose I think of the opening of a book as not only a way of, well, it's a first introduction to the reader to the voice of the book. So the reader has to know from the very beginning, this is the sort of voice I will be hearing over the next 200 or so pages. And this is how I will be addressed. And so you build a familiarity with the reader. But I also think that the beginning of this book, I wanted to elevate the stakes for the book and then collapse them and build back up to the moment in which we first encounter that idea of the story of the book. So that when you meet Elias in the book, you have this nagging sensation in the back of your head of what is about to happen. But I don't, as a character in the book. So it sets up a sort of irony where you might pick up on things that I am missing, or you have this sense of foreboding in the book that I can only achieve by looking back in time. So I wanted to, in that first section, I suppose almost use it as a prologue to the book. It happens in the narrative future, I suppose, and then we move back in time. And I suppose primarily, I approach this book. The reason I go in such a non-linear fashion sometimes is partly my getting to grips with prose itself. This was, the first time I had written an extended prose book that wasn't academic. And one of my main problems was, how do I deliver information to you without constantly saying, oh, here's another thing you need to know actually to understand this. You know, there's a temptation in prose is that you realize that you need a lot of explanation in order to say something. So rather than constantly having to explain things, I just let the non-linearity come out. And when something felt that it needed explaining, I might take you back in time, but maybe not give you the direct link as to why I'm taking you back in time yet. So, yeah, I suppose I want to treat the reader as a writer with a deal of respect that they don't need me to lead them all the time. And so throughout the book I kind of stitched in little clues or images and things like that that might just be kind of decorative in the end, but they were my kind of sly winks to a reader who might be paying attention, who might be reading for a second time.
You see, it's impossible for me to read innocently. So when I read that, I immediately thought of J.R. Ackley's book, My Father and Myself, and which is one of the greatest autobiographies ever written. And Ackley tells you about his brother being killed on the Western Front. He has this sort of roundup of the family, and he kills him. And then the next chapter is 2 years earlier, and his brother is going out onto no man's land. And you think, wow, why did you do that, J.R.? And I think the reason he did it, and I think the reason you perhaps did this, is in order to make the reader go, oh, wait a second, no, the person I've got to concentrate on is the narrator, not Elias. I'm going to be given his story, but it's not that is the centre of this. It's what the narrator, Seán, makes of what it is that happens to him. And I also, interestingly, I know you're about to say something, but I read it and I thought, oh, okay, right, so this is a book about the mind and the mind going awry. And I thought, that's interesting. I like that kind of stuff. But it's not. I mean, it is about a mind going awry. It's a book about secrecy. So you direct me towards you, and at the same time you lead me off. It's a sort of Derren Brown misdirection kind of moment. And then you're going through and you're thinking, yeah, wow, oh, wow. But actually it's about secrecy. Is that fair?
I think that's very fair. Yeah, I think when I'm writing, I might reveal a bit about the sort of writer I am, is I'm often kind of playing a game with an imagined reader, and I'm trying to orchestrate that game well with you. What I mean by that is I treat it as kind of a sparring match between myself and this imagined reader who might pick up on ideas, and I want to negotiate back a space in which those ideas might become resonant, or I might drop a hint to you, and it's hard to know as a writer what sort of person a reader might imagine you to be from the book. You can't read your own book with any sort of objectivity, really. So you have to let go of the idea that you might be a likable person in the book. You have to let go of the fact that you might, that the reader should think that you are a worthy or morally or ethically always perfectly sound person, and instead hope that they might at least just respect the truth-telling or the voice of it in the way that you might respect someone that you had a conversation with, because they might feel at least the personality of the writer, even if they don't necessarily like that personality. I hope you do like me enough.
You're absolutely charming and delightful. I can reassure you on that point.
But it was entirely unimportant to me that you should. I didn't want to approach the book from the defensive position of I want people to like me when I finished. Because I think that is a sort of, to come back to your point, it's a sort of secrecy in that it will make you hide things in the book. It will make you kind of turn things to put you in a good light. It creates a form of lying.
Yeah.
And I think if you're going to write well, you have to get rid of that likability factor, which I know is kind of a, people like likable narrators or relatable narrators, but I wasn't particularly interested in being that sort of narrator.
Although you do have style on your side. I mean, the ability to use language. I mean, that is incredibly persuasive. So there's a passage. You're describing. I'm going back to secrecy. You're describing because one of the things the book unpicks is the way in which the denial of the authentic self and the true self and one's true sexual nature is repressed, obliterated, whatever. A large, kind woman telling me I shouldn't be gay, you describe. There are many instances, but this is something from your childhood. And your concern in the book is to, one, explain how the process, how the muffling and the denying and the suppressing is enabled and enacted culturally, socially, and secondly, how it is reversed. So before we get on to Elias, in just broad brushstroke terms, what are the milestones? What were the things along the way that enabled you to understand the nature of what it is that you were enmeshed and trapped in, and then allowed you to gradually extricate yourself?
I think this might be just a particular curse of being a writer, but I think that the milestones were in the writing of the book.
The writing of this book.
I don't think I knew what I was fully writing about until I did it.
Oh, wow.
And then I began to see the connections between things as I went. So when I talk about those kind of tangents or the way that the book goes in non-linear ways, it was because I would kind of write a scene and then maybe I would go for a walk and I would think, it's suggested another event in my life that will now maybe find a place in the book. So in that way, the form of the book became a sort of
revelation to the self.
Yeah.
As you were doing it.
It suggested where I might think next or where I might go.
Wow.
Looking. And so I just attempted to follow that revelation.
Or the psychic prompts.
Yeah. And so it was only really towards the end of the book when I was thinking, how do I wrap this up? As, you get to a certain stage in the book and you think, I think I've said almost everything, but I don't know where to end. And I had to go back and look through that kind of like Russian dolls of identity. There is kind of the exterior self, and then you peel away a layer and there's another one. And you think, is that the true one, or is he hiding something too? And then you pull it back and there's another one in there. And so I end with the image of myself as a child. But really, I'm not utterly convinced that, when you bust these secrets open, you ever really get back to an entirely unsecretive self. I became less and less convinced that there was this kind of uncorrupted version of the self left at the end. I think there is something healthy in stripping back layers of secrecy. But can you ever go back in time? No. I think the idea is, in the book is continuing forward in with a better awareness of what you hide and why you hide it. In that way, it's kind of, a bit like the method of psychoanalysis or something, this book.
I thought a lot about Grayson Perry, bizarrely. And Grayson Perry's argument, I've heard him promulgate it many times, which is that everything has to be in the room. You can't go back and retrieve what's lost or alter what's done. But in the present moment, everything has to be now, present, actualized. And that seemed to be the point that the book arrives at.
Well, yeah, in this book, if I can explain a little bit more about the structure, is that I began with, I have the main story of the book, which is the love story and the story of depression. And then I have the story of the narrator of the book, me. And that second story only really emerged the more I thought about the first story. The first story is a story about, at least as it's lived, feeling freer and then finding oneself trapped in a sort of, a secret because of the way that society treats mental health. It is surrounded in secrecy. You must keep it secret for all number of reasons, either to protect someone else or to protect yourself as you go. And then it started to echo back into other forms of secrecy, hiding, and that suggested the personal narrative that went alongside it of the narrator. So that's why those two stories kind of chime off each other as we go. And then, of course, I added the third layer of other people who keep secrets, which is the poets who serve as the church. These people that serve as kind of warnings or possible other avenues in the book, or ghostly forms of the self that might have been.
The passage in the book that struck me the most, I love the book, but the one that really struck me was, it's in the middle, and you're talking about your own despair with Elias. Your own despair about Elias's despair. And you say, the impassable, treacherous terrain of the mind, those chasms of despair, how could anyone who hadn't felt those cliffs know them? How could I ever know Hopkins or Elias? How could I ever see past the mirror surface that reflected everything back at me with my own image imposed across it? And it's a beautiful, excellent, clear, cogent summation of the knowledge problem. How do you know? But then you go on to describe how you might actually bridge the gap. But the word you use in the passage that follows is compassion. It's not effort, it's not will, it's compassion, it's self-forgiveness. So it's as if everything that goes wrong in your life that then directs you back to understand everything that's happened to you, you then have to take a deep breath and you have to say to yourself, do you know what? I am not going to berate myself. I'm not going to disparage myself. I'm going to attempt to be kind. And not only kind to yourself, but to all the others. The large, kind woman, and many other people who you cite in the course of the text. You're very, very reasonable.
Thank you. I think, to begin with, that line that you quoted is sort of an artistic anxiety that arises when you write a book like this, which is, am I making this all about me? Which, with a memoir, you kind of often are, at least on the surface of it. So the key question that brought up was, that was a moment when I was writing where I thought, have I just written a book all about me? And to begin with, that felt like a dereliction of duty to the story, in that I was trying to write a book about everyone else and also how they, those lives affect me. But it was only at that point in the book that I realized that I could do nothing else than write a book that was all about me, because I was the only person that I fully knew.
Yeah.
And that was actually a liberatory thing in the book, because I had, at that point, I could stop worrying about getting everyone else right. They could become kind of characters in the book. And of course, the speaking voice of a book is always a sort of character anyway. Yeah. I don't speak like this book in daily life. This is not Seán narrating the book. It's kind of a version of Seán that lives inside the book, if that makes sense. He has to create his own style, and it allows him to say certain things in certain ways that if I sat here and said them now might seem pretentious or awfully grand or decorous or whatever. I wanted this book to move towards a place of, it begins, as Niamh said, in the cemetery, and it unleashes kind of all of these ghosts into the narrative, all of these things that haunt me as a narrator. And in some ways it has to be a reckoning with those haunted selves that float around the book. And the only way to draw it all together was through that sort of compassion in which you can welcome those kind of warring fragments back into a sort of whole, or sort of make peace with the ghosts in that way. So, yeah, a sort of way of letting them go on their own way. So towards the end, I kind of talk about calling them all back, calling them home, I think.
There is compassion, but you're very hard on yourself as well. The account of dispensing with the green-eyed boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was painful to read.
Was it?
Yeah, absolutely painful. This is life. These are people love, and then they stop loving, and then they say something to the person who might still love them, and the sky doesn't fall in, but it's not fun for the parties.
I think I had to acknowledge at that point that this couldn't be a book that pointed the finger always elsewhere at other people that had done things always horrible to me, or all horrible to me, because we are all flawed people, and we all take in certain ideas from the world, and at various times in our life we might say something that, when you say something, you say, I didn't mean that, but you kind of do mean it, or it's come from somewhere. There's the idea is in your head and it's come out of your mouth. So there's some responsibility for it, or at least an interest in where did that idea come from. So that particular story is about classism, really, and me trying to reckon with, I think, a sort of deflective way of trying to become middle class by distancing myself from other people around me, and by putting on, a certain accent that now I'm stuck with. And so I had to reckon with the way that has come out of me as well in the book. So it couldn't always just be a case of me pointing the finger. Sometimes the finger has to be pointed back at yourself.
What's brilliant about that section, I mean, the whole book is brilliant, but what's brilliant about that section is that at that moment, you were in your late teens, you go, as a reader, you go, oh yeah, absolutely. 18-year-old or 19-year-old Seán could not have done it any other way with the green-eyed boy, but that way. One of the church plays a part in the story, and there's a fantastic line, which I think comes in the Lord's section, or just before, I think it comes just after, in which you say of the church, the world I had defended and into which I had intertwined myself did not love me. I think you're in Lord's and you're realizing that attitudes, priestly public attitudes and private attitudes, or the church's public and private, are like miles apart. Did not love me. That's very kind. Because, the church is really, I mean, I don't know. Church really...
Yeah, you could have phrased it another way.
It hasn't really covered itself in glory. No. Let's say it like that. But what happened at Lourdes, and why was Lourdes so important?
Well, I think, the reason that I said it did not love me is because...
It's true.
It's true, but that is the terms on which my relationship had rested. As in, if you love somebody, the way that you put it is, but they don't love me back. So the terms were not hatred or dislike or anything like that. It was not a mirrored relationship. The reason that I had, and this is a little bit complicated in the book and goes back to that idea of hiding and also the sort of self-protection of a child, is that I was convinced, I think, as a child looking back, that because I knew that there was something wrong with me, the church was a place of morality and goodness. So if I could be accepted there, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. So I became very kind of holy. I was a pious little shit, I became holier than thou. My brothers didn't go to church. No one bothered. It wasn't there was parental pressure or anything like that. But I decided I was gonna go to church and be a good Catholic boy. The Lord's section is important in the book. It's kind of almost directly in the middle of the book, because it's the moment where I begin to feel two selves breaking apart.
The integrated, assimilated self and the true self.
So there is this kind of hiding self that is accepted, and the other self that is asserting itself. And that will result in the breaking apart of this
carapace.
Yeah. I call it a kind of an armor in the book, but yeah, carapace is a good word too. So in Lourdes, it's a very strange place if you've been.
Well, it struck me because I have done it.
Yeah.
I went on a bus.
Did you recognize it?
Yeah, my God, did I recognize it?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, it's a very odd place because in some ways it's incredibly tacky, and then in other ways it's very elegant.
That's a very kind understatement.
But it has a sort of elegance.
The grotto has a sort of
yeah, and the
elegance.
basilica and the mountains behind it, lovely blue river that I'm convinced they put something in because it's
I'm
so
sure
blue.
they do. Yeah. Yeah.
And there are moments at night, you know, where there's nuns walking through with candles and they're singing, and you think, well, this is lovely. But there are also, you know, the sort of tap that you can buy is, you know, I tried to list a couple of things in the book that I remember, but there's, you know, there'd be like hologram bookmarks where it was kind of like smiling Jesus, crucified Jesus as you went past, or there was there were plates where you could have your photo taken with your family and have it superimposed onto the grotto, so kind of like you were standing there with Mary on a plate, and then you could have the plate. My favorite one was these pens that I wrote about. You know, the like pens that you get in kind of tacky seaside resorts where have a woman on them, and then when you tip it, her clothes kind of fall off. But they had one where if you tipped it, like Mary came down into the grotto. It was just like, so like there's all this kind of stuff that's really crass and irreligious, if funny, there as well. But it was one of those moments where I kind of realized that I'm going to have to go off into a different world, and I have to leave this protective layer behind. And the question is, you know, who can I take with me, or who will follow me if I go, or will I be just cut out? Yeah. Do you want me to read a little bit from it? Yeah.
Please.
So I thought I would just read just a little bit of me. I decided to go into the baths. So when you're in Lords, you kind of get assigned someone to look after. And often, you know, whoever it is might want to go to church or go to many masses, or if you're lucky, they kind of just want to go to the pub all day. And you're like, yes. So you just kind of go to the pub. But I decided at one point that I would, you know, the queue to go into the baths is sometimes a couple of hours long, and you're in the queue anyway. So I thought, well, I may as well, while I'm here, go in. So I'll just read you a couple of paragraphs of it. So, once I was ushered through the first curtain, the world took on a sense of unreality. Echoed voices caught in the water, high-pitched drops of water falling from the stones. In the background, a chant of prayer was punctuated occasionally by the crash of cold waters as a body was submerged and then lifted. Inside this first room, 2 men came and stood on either side of me. They held up a blue sheet so that I could undress between them, and then they wrapped me tightly in it and asked me to sit down again. I had never been naked among strangers before. Swaddled and uncomfortable on the wooden slats of the benches, I tried awkwardly not to look at the other men. Most of them were old, ill, I thought, in some indefinable way I could not diagnose by the movements of their frail torsos. Watching them, I felt an unnerving sensation, an anxiety, as though I too were one of the dying, waiting here, goosebumps sharpening along my arms, my nipples tight and cold, hoping somehow to fix whatever it was wrong with me. Perhaps each of them looked at me in turn, the pale young man sitting awkwardly in his blue sheet, and pitied me. Perhaps they imagined some cruel virus multiplying inside me as I made a last-ditch appeal to faith, my prayer to a God who might, at this late hour, show his face. One by one, we were beckoned through a second curtain, each of us standing when called and walking solemnly, nervously through to the other side. When my turn came, I went between the wet slats of the curtain and into the chamber beyond. The room was split on 2 levels. The lower level was set with a deep marble bath, the clear water rocking inside. And above it, at eye level with me as I stood on the raised floor, was a small white statuette of the Virgin, who was looking down peacefully over the scene below, her miniature hands lifted together in prayer. All the walls were tiled in a grey slate which glistened and sweated. There were 2 other men in the room. After I entered, they took off my blue sheet and wrapped me quickly in a white cotton one, damp and translucent, and bound me in it tightly so that my penis was pressed uncomfortably upwards. There was no time to adjust myself, no time when I wasn't being watched. The 2 men led me down the 3 stone steps into the bath and told me in French to look up at the Virgin. I did so, obediently focusing on her. A prayer was said, and I ended with an uncertain Amen, a sign of the cross, before the men put their hands onto me, one on my chest, one on my back, and sank me down into the water, which shattered beneath me with a loud crash, and then remade itself across me.
Brilliant. As somebody who has done that, I was there for several days. I did it every day.
It must have been very clean.
I was so clean and pure. It was wonderful. But that's like you emerge as a new, it's a baptism and it's a numinous experience. You become a new person. What we've been talking about you, what is the story of Elias? What you meet him in South America.
Meet him in South
reading
America.
Tom Jones. You are.
I am, yeah.
Curious choice.
Yeah, I mean, I was backpacking, so
Why
I decided...
did you take Tom Jones?
Because it was long.
Long, okay.
And
You could have taken Clarissa. But
yeah, I wanted to take... Basically, my idea was that I would take books that, because I would have access to no other books, I wouldn't be able to not read, if that makes sense. As in, I wanted those books that otherwise, if I was at home, I might give up halfway through and switch to something else. Now I would be forced to read. Tom Jones, I took Ulysses and War and Peace.
good choice.
Yeah. So just big, heavy books, and then I deposited them on the way as I went around. So I met him. It was after I graduated, and I had no idea what I was going to do. I found I was very unskilled for the workforce, or had no experience and couldn't get a job. So I worked in Marks and Spencer's. Actually, I left them out of the book. As like a Christmas temp, and saved all my money, and then went to South America with not enough money. It turned out when I got there, I was having to spend about $2 a day while I was there. I was traveling on my own, and I had this horrible feeling when I got there that I wasn't at all as brave as I thought I was. So I turned up in Bogota, in Colombia, on my own on the first night, and I just wanted to cry because I thought, I'm going to be on my own for 3 months. How do I make any friends? What am I going to do? So I remember sitting there in the hostel on the first day, and I was kind of too shy to even go outside. I kind of would walk down the street and didn't really know what I was supposed to do. What do you do when you're in a city on your own? You go to a museum, you feel very on your own, feel very uncomfortable, like you're kind of performing being a person. Well, that's how I felt anyway. And so I booked myself kind of 3 or 4 days in Colombia and decided that I should at least go somewhere. So I took a bus to a place called Popayan. And that was when I met Elias, who is one of the main characters in the book. And we kind of fall in love in the sunshine and the freedom of not having much else to do. So 3 months every day with someone means that you feel very close to them very quickly. Imagine how many kind of coffee dates 3 months is. It's basically like 6 years of time. So you kind of build up this very close relationship very quickly. And when I went home eventually, I was utterly in love and utterly convinced that I couldn't stay at home. I had to go and live in Sweden. So I did, and then it all goes very quickly downhill. So the kind of sunny romance of the book turns, and this is how it did happen, but it just happens to seem like pathetic fallacy as the winter arrives. Depression kind of just comes like a storm into the house, and there is a near suicide attempt that kind of halts, at least in the book. That is the moment of unraveling. You follow a love story up until that point, and then after that you follow a story of unraveling, in my mind. And it's sort of an unraveling that goes two ways. There are two characters in this book. I mean, I like the cover of the UK Island edition because it has two falling men. The American cover just has the one falling man. But I like the idea that as one person tumbles here, the other one tumbles too, which is how it happens in the book and how it happened in real life. That feeling that when someone else begins to fall, if you are trying to stop them from falling, it's very easy to grab them and be pulled over the edge as well. So then it's a case of trying to excavate your way out of that situation, which is where the book kind of then moves towards.
There's, in the South American section and subsequently in Sweden, there's a lot about language. One point you talk about the way Swedish frustrates you because you can't bend it. You can't make it carry the meanings that you want to carry. There are also very interesting sections about your joint encounter with and translation of Karen Boyer?
Yeah.
Who also, there are two, there's Gerald Manley Hopkins and Karen Boyer is the other literary presence. If Elias had been Anglophone, would it have been different? Because you do also make the point that he was not in the slightest bit Swedish.
Yeah. I think, so Swedish people, I think what Carlo means by that is Swedish people are very quiet, or at least in my experience. And
somber.
And Elias was not. I think it would have made a difference, at least to me, if I was convinced that I could understand someone, or at least have the illusion that I could understand someone who was speaking my language. I think the main problem with the book, or that the book found itself in as I was writing it, is that we don't really have much language to talk about. We say depression, or if you Google other words for depression, there kind of aren't many. Melancholy doesn't mean what you want it to mean, and there's only so many times you can use a word before you kind of wear it out. In a book, at least, you can't just keep on saying it. We don't really have a language to talk about what's going on inside our heads sometimes, particularly the specificities of it. Or at least I don't think like a lay language. Maybe doctors and psychologists have a better language than I have at my disposal. And so you are, a problem with mental health very quickly becomes a problem of speech and language and expression, which is perhaps why we have talking therapies. And if you're unable to fully feel satisfied that you're getting your experience out into language and someone else is comprehending that, I think it can make the situation worse because you feel even more misunderstood because someone isn't getting what you're saying. And so I think if in that situation Elias wasn't having to translate twice his feelings for me, not translate once out of the non-verbal mess of the head into language, but then also translate that into English. Perhaps I could have understood more, or it would have been less tiring for him. So I do think that the language barrier was an issue, which is where Karin Boye kind of comes in. So we translate. She is a Swedish modernist poet who ends up dying by suicide in the 1940s. But she lived in Gothenburg, which is where in Sweden we're living in the book. And we kind of use her poems as they're almost ciphers for our own feelings. As we begin to translate what she's saying, it gives us ways to think about, or it puts language on experience. And so the joint project of translating the poems is a sort of way of speaking to each other through Karin Boye. So yeah, she's a very important kind of figure in the book.
On the 23rd of April 1941, Karen went out into the woods to meet that other self. She dies in the woods. And the book is, she does fit incredibly well into the overall structure, because she talked about the idea that everything that she'd imported into herself from the Swedish culture was an absolute, did not fit with everything that was inside her and that was true. So maybe that's the other self that she's going out to meet, the true self. But the book is, she also fits in a different sense, which is you have the sense that Elias is not the person that you knew, that there's another person, or there's two people, or there's a doubleness. And because you don't know this other person, it's absolutely terrifying. And you then get caught in a permanent present of obligatory vigilance, where you're watching this person who you know, and then there's this other person who is also them, who might harm themselves. So the book really communicates. I mean, you were saying there isn't a language for talking about the way misery is, but boy, does it communicate the misery. That's a compliment.
Good, glad. I think this is really the reason that I turned to the Gothic Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, right, in that introduction. And I ramp up in certain points of this book a Gothic style. Not because I want you to necessarily believe in ghosts or vampires or whatever, but because at certain moments in the book, those seem to be the most apt metaphors or ways of communicating what's happening. So I can't think of much more uncanny, in the real sense of the word, than finding a person that you know is no longer the person you know. There's an extremely uncanny situation. And feeling that you don't know which version of someone you're speaking to at any moment, or if someone is looking for clues in what you're saying or mistrusting you, or if you are unwittingly helping someone who wants to kill themselves. You know, you're put in a state of extreme vigilance and distrust. And there's not really an easy route out of it. I was thinking of this kind of idea of doubling. And that does come through in Corinne Boyer's poems as well. She has this, try and find it, I don't know where it is. She has a poem that's one of the later poems that she wrote, in which death is a person following her. Mm-hmm. But I think that's kind of what I meant by the idea of doubleness, is that there is a version of you who wants to live, and there's a version of you who wants to die. Yeah. So in her poem, she separates it into two different figures. She has herself walking and death walking behind her. She's, I won't read the Swedish to you because I'll embarrass myself, but yeah, she, I listen, I hear life fleeing steadily faster now. The calm steps behind me, death, it is you. And then the final stanza is, it's as though you want something from me, a little present, that's what you want, a curious little key, that little word, yes. And that's that kind of terror of the anti-self that just wants you to turn around and say, yes, yeah. I give in. So that was, there is sort of an uncanny in the book in the echoes between Corinne Boyer's life and poems and the story of the book as well. Which is why I think that she kind of emerges in some ways as the most severe or terrifying ghost or historical example in the book, because she parallels the situation so closely that she almost offers a conclusion that you are afraid might be the conclusion of the story here as well. So in some ways it's negotiating your way out of the conclusion that she had in the book. So yeah, she's a brilliant poet. Unfortunately, she doesn't have any great translators, but I've translated some of the poems in the book, so you can read some of them. But she's fascinating. She also wrote good novels as well.
Close to the end, you go to church on St. Lucy's Day? Or
Yes.
Yeah. And so some months have occurred, or no, more than that. Maybe it's a year of turmoil and life and stuff. And then you stop. That's at the end of section 7. And then we go to the next section and you realize, oh, yeah, when I read those 2 lines at the beginning about going to the airport, these are the, it's been left out, but those years are covered.
Yeah.
That is really genius. Because you don't need it.
Yeah.
You've done everything. You can work out the 2 years that it's using a space to communicate everything so that you can go forward. Or maybe we could say it's knowing when to stop.
Yeah. I think sometimes you have to be decisive enough that you might shock a reader, and to say, you don't need to know all of the details that happen after this. And in some ways, this idea of inconclusiveness was important to me in the book. I was never really a huge fan of memoirs that all kind of were about overcoming and getting somewhere and the kind of triumphant lessons learned.
Oh, I Will Survive memoirs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what did you learn from this experience? As if I'm an oracle because I have lived, which everyone has. So I don't know any more than you do about this, these things. And life is kind of inconclusive, and there are sometimes no easy lessons to be drawn from things. So I didn't want to. It would feel a bit twee to me to try and wrap this up in a bow at the end. As you do when you write something, you come up with many possible endings in your head. I could end it that day we did this, and maybe on this image, or I could leave us here, or I could even flash forward, and take us somewhere else at the end.
You had a great. There's a great line towards the end. Everything carries within itself. Yeah, we've run out of water. Yeah,
that's incredible.
Right.
I'm just kind of compulsive. Drinking.
Molly's standards are falling. Everything carries within itself the remnant forms of older selves, older structures we have evolved through, vestiges of the history of our species. And you read that and it sends you back as a reader to the beginning, and you have this idea of kind of the mesh, and everything is connected. Only now we have a much stronger sense of what constitutes that which we are connected to. Ah, look. Fabulous.
Thank you.
More water, sir.
I'm just drinking it because it's there.
Yeah, well, why not? Yeah, it's laced with LSD, actually. No, that's a joke. Obviously, we don't encourage that sort of thing. And so when I got to that, I thought to myself, yeah, that's cunning. So, first of all, I thought it was about despair. Then I discovered it's about secrets. And finally, the place where you land it's about, I'm going to use a Jungian word, individuation. It's about coming into the self. It's about, and there is no answer, because you go through pain and suffering and grief and happiness and joy. But more of the former than the latter.
Yeah.
And then you come out, and actually the thing that you are, your metal has been made out of all of that. And it is that is existing inside you, and then you go forward. Yeah. And there's just no other way to be.
No, I mean, I said that there's a couple of kind of secrets in the book that I put in just for me. Maybe I'll reveal a couple of them, but they're not like huge things. But as you write a book, or as I write a book, I might finish one version of it, and then it's kind of like you go back and you add little things, and you think, oh well, if I had that here, maybe that can echo in this image later on, and you start to kind of stitch it a bit tighter. One of them was the orange, which I brought back twice. So there's a scene in which one of the first characters, Jack is the first one at university, but his boyfriend, Hassan...
which is a brilliant scene.
Thanks. Tells me that his granddad used to make him eat orange rinds when he was... acting a bit camp.
As a prophylactic against effeminacy.
Yeah. It's very effective. And so he burns oranges in the fire, or when he finishes an orange, he throws the rind in the fire. And that's where this book ends, is throwing orange rinds in the fire.
Yeah.
And it was also my little Jeanette Winterson wink in the book. But the other one, which is prompted by what you've just said, was Joyce, who we know well in this room. And the idea of forging in the smithy of my soul, at the end of Portrait. So I kind of wanted to end with a little nod to a furnace and self-making, but rather than forging the uncreated consciousness of my race, which is big ask. I just wanted it to be a kind of personal self-making. So we end with that kind of fire, the forge. And I never wanted to kind of sum up what is made in the forge. I just wanted to leave you at the forge.
Well, it's a kind of
making
openness,
something.
isn't it?
Yeah. What I wanted to do in this book was to break everything down to the point that it might be remade again. So I think by the end, I found that I had broken enough stuff down, enough secrets away, that I had got to a point in which things might be reconstructed again. And so that's the open-endedness of the book, is a sort of hope to me. I think it's a hopeful ending.
No, it is.
So good. So that's why I wanted to end on those ideas of self-making and calling shameful or hidden or denied parts of the self back into the room, into the light. So some of the ghosts come home, some versions of myself come home, and they all go into that fire. And we'll see what comes out of them. Yeah.
You're allowed one question. So, don't hold back. Get it in. And then we're going to have to stop. Or perhaps nobody has a question. Yes? Okay, you've got to wait for the microphone. The microphone will come to you. No, down here. Sorry. This lady. She was the... Yep. Yeah. The only one I saw.
Well, now that you can hear me.
Yeah.
I'm just very curious. I'm very obsessed with the process of writing nonfiction, but in a very narrative style. And, exposing a lot about yourself. How do you find this balance between writing for yourself, like you said, having secrets or little things that only you know in your story, and writing for others or for the audience? Because obviously, as a writer, you do have to acknowledge you're writing for other people.
Yeah. I think it's about stakes. If it seems trivial to you, it might seem trivial to someone else. I think the main thing is to be as honest about yourself as possible, and it's my contention that if you are as honest as possible, you may find that someone else recognizes themselves in you, and that is the connection that is drawn in a book. So I think writing about yourself, you have to be consciously thinking about how other people will connect to it. If you tell a good story truthfully, people very unlike yourself might find that they're not so unlike you after all, which has been my experience with this book. I'm telling a very specific story of my life, and it feels very personal, and perhaps it feels very individual to me. But you wouldn't believe the amount of people who say, "Oh, I thought it was only me that happened to," or or have had the sensation that I was saying things that they had felt before but had never said aloud. And so that's the power of being as truthful as possible, is because you never really know what sticks with someone. There may be passages in this book that you think, I have no idea what he's talking about. That's never happened to me. But then perhaps I might say something that sticks, and you think, well, that did, that I recognize that feeling. And that's only by chance. But I think it's just a fact of being human, that we're not so different from each other as we might think. So I would say so long as you are honest with yourself on the page, and you describe it in such a way as it's allows someone to feel what you feel, they will likely recognize something in it. Everything has some sort of universality. Even if it's a specific shame to me, everyone has felt shame about something. So even if it's not shame about the same thing, it's still a connection point. That's how I approach it.
I'm feeling guilty about somebody was about to get the microphone and it was snatched away. Excalibur was about. So we'll just have one more question from that person who had the microphone and had it taken away.
No, I thought she was trying to pass it down the row.
Oh, so there's no more. Right, so that's it. That's it. You don't have a question. You've been given a unique chance. Once in a lifetime, but you've decided to pass. Right. Ladies and gentlemen, please show your appreciation of this marvelous writer.
Thank you very much.
It was brilliant.
Thank you. Thanks.
Brilliant.
Thanks,
Brilliant.
everyone.
Niamh, thank you. Thank you. And good luck.
Yeah, I suppose I would love to say thank you to Carlo, also to Peter, Rooney. It's been such an honor to be chosen and to be able to do events like this. And thanks, Niamh, for handing the baton over, and to Molly for hosting us, and to you all as well. Thank you.